Half more can here. I'm Jerry Weaver. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is July the 2nd, 1989. And I got a home group. My home group is a group called There Is a Solution. We meet in Holly Springs. I'm going to take this off. I like sympathy, but I don't want you to feel too sorry for me. That might not have been a good idea. Probably should put it back on. We meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Methodist Church in Holly Springs. It's a good group of Alcoholics Anonymous. A bunch of y'all have been there. I got a bunch of home group members with me tonight. I appreciate y'all coming out with me. I also have a sponsor. Sorry about this. I screwed more stuff up in the last week than I have in 30 years. Thank you. I appreciate that, Megan. Sorry about that. Hey, it's good to be here tonight. It's good to be sober. And I fell off a ladder last Friday. No, when was it? I don't know when it was, but I broke my wrist and I had surgery on Friday, so I've been a little foggy ever since. I'm not on pain medication. Just for the record, several of y'all have asked me about that. You act like you were joking, but I know you weren't. And so anyway, I did take 2 Tylenol before I left the house. That's all I got, though, but I'm a big wimp when it comes to injuries. I haven't been hurt in years, so it's a new experience for me. But I'm going to do the best that I can. And I'm not an expert on traditions or anything having to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. But I am a guy that has had a transformation of mind and body and spirit as a result of being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and taking the steps and practicing the program to the best of my ability. And sometimes it's difficult to actually share the truth about what's happened to me because, well, sometimes I wonder if people would actually believe it. But it doesn't seem that that's a lot of people's experience. And sometimes it's hard to share that because you don't know if people are going to believe you. But the reality is that on the morning of July the 2nd, in 1989, I was walking down a road in Harnett County, and I tried lots of ways to get sober and to get my life in order. I'd been drinking since I was 12 years old. I just turned 22 years old, and I'd ruined the family. I had destroyed my parents and my wife and brothers and sisters and all those folks that had tried to help me. They had basically, I thought they'd given up on me, but obviously they had not. But those relationships seemed to be destroyed. I tried to stay sober through a church. I tried to stay sober through psychiatry. I tried to stay sober through taking pills. I tried to stay sober through reading books and literature and Bible and New Testament. I was an expert on the New Testament. I'd preach to you, and then I'd go out in the parking lot and drink some Thunderbird wine and pop some more Percocets, and then come back in and preach to you a few more times. And I had attempted suicide 3 times, died twice, been kicked out of 2 school systems, and had basically just given up on life. And I left the guy's house one morning to go write another bad check. And I had, up to that point, I had made all kinds of promises to my family. I would try to quit drinking, and I'd leave the house to go get some cigarettes or something and be drunk 30 minutes later, stay gone for several days, and just one lie, one scam after another. And that morning, when I was walking down the road, interesting thing about it was that there was nobody after me or nobody trying to get me to stop doing anything. I didn't even know what my problem was. I had no knowledge of Alcoholics Anonymous or 12 Steps. Didn't know anything about alcoholism. All I knew was that I got into a lot of trouble. I hurt people and I drank a lot and couldn't stay sober. But I didn't know what was wrong with me. And it was like my whole life flashed before my eyes that morning, in that I realized I was an absolute loser. I was an absolute, just a walking disaster. And I wanted to get help, but I didn't want to get help. Knew that I needed help, but I didn't know what that looked like. And these like voices started going off in my head, and which wasn't unusual. I had a lot of voices. I've had voices going off in my head since I came out of my mom's womb. Part of why I drank, it shut that stuff down. And these voices were telling me that, man, you just turned 22 years old. Your life should be starting. You shouldn't. It shouldn't be ending. And these words came out of my mouth. Basically, I can remember it just like it was right now. I said, "There's got to be something better than this." And then I said, "God, please help me." Now, what I can tell you is that when I said that, nothing happened. I mean, it was no visible or physical thing that happened, other than I've been sober ever since. And I didn't, at that morning, I was not searching out a solution. I was not searching out recovery. Didn't know what recovery was. I was not searching out God. It searched me. It found me. And call that power whatever you want to call it, but a power came to me that I didn't even know about and literally changed the course of my life. And I didn't do anything to make that happen. You can't create surrender. Surrender it's either happened or it hasn't. And that's what happened to me that morning, was that a surrender came up in me that I had no recollection or no idea of what it was. And I ended up that morning in a detox with no idea what that was. It looked a lot like jail to me. But through a series of just what I would have called at the time coincidences, I ended up in a detox. And a guy came in and talked to me, and the conversation was very, very different than the conversations that I had with a preacher or a doctor or a psychiatrist or a counselor. In that all he did was he talked about himself. He didn't tell me what he thought I ought to be doing. He didn't ask me how I was doing. He just talked about how he drank, and he talked about things that he had done. And by him sharing that with me, I was able to identify with what my problem was, which is alcoholism. And the guy gave me some hope, because he was just like me in the things that he had done and the way that he felt, but yet he was different in that he'd been sober for a number of years. And he told me a few things about alcoholism, about when we start drinking we can't stop, and that we got a mind that tells us it's okay to do that. And I understood it immediately. I don't know, I never questioned it. I knew when it was described to me, I knew I had it. And he point blank told me, he didn't sugarcoat it or skirt around the issue. He basically told me that if I didn't find a power greater than myself, that I wasn't going to be able to stay sober. And that rang with me, in that I was desperate, I was depressed, the world was dark, and I needed and I wanted help. And when he told me that, he told me a few other things. He told me that I should go into the room there and get down on my knees and pray. He didn't sugarcoat that. He just said, what do you got to lose? You're sitting in here in a detox on suicide watch with basically nobody trying to help you on the outside. And that's what I did. I went in, I prayed, and I just asked for help. And I've been sober ever since that moment. And what would happen not long after that is I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was introduced to our literature, and I was introduced to 12 steps. I was introduced to the idea of being involved in a group. I was introduced to the idea of sponsorship. I was introduced to the idea of immediately trying to help somebody else and getting out of yourself. And that Alcoholics Anonymous is not a selfish program, and that it's unselfish, and that we get out of ourselves to get better. And so I did those things. I joined a group, and I got a sponsor, and I took the steps. And slowly over time, what happened to me was my life started to change. In that, number one, I started to realize that I actually could stay sober through whatever life threw at me. I had a 16-year-old sister I was sober about 3 months. They got killed in a car accident. And not that I ever needed an excuse to drink, but that would have been a good reason to drink. And I didn't drink. I had a wife that I knew was going to come back to me when I got sober. Well, she didn't come back. She kept sleeping with my cousin. And just shattered me. And then she started messing around with this bouncer that worked at the Long Branch named Jungle. And devastated me. But you know what? I stayed sober. And it's a true story. And you know, lots of things that happened in early sobriety, I was able to stay sober because of that power that came to me that morning and introduced me to a program that taught me how to live without drinking alcohol. And what would happen to me as a result of taking those steps and giving my life to God and just trying to the best of my ability to practice the program as best as I could, which meant taking an inventory and sharing that with a guy, and then going back and making amends to people that I had harmed, was that what the book talks about happened to me, was that I had a spiritual awakening. The obsession to drink left. A purpose came up inside of me that was different than anything I had felt before. And my mind and my thoughts and my feelings started to change for the better. And that's my experience. And that power and that transformation of mind and thought and body, feelings, has continued throughout my life sober and as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now it's done this, but I've continued to get better and I've continued to grow spiritually as a result of just giving my life to God and to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of it's interesting to me that our literature talks about our problem being lack of power. It doesn't talk about alcohol being our problem. That our problem is lack of power. I don't have enough power to live successfully of and by myself. I don't have enough power to stay sober of and by myself. That's my dilemma. So if I don't find a power to help me stay sober, and if I don't find a power to help me live, then I'm not going to make it. It also tells us that our selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our trouble. Doesn't mention drinking. It says the root of my trouble is selfishness and self-centeredness. That all I'm concerned about is myself. All I'm concerned about is things going the way that I want them to go. All I'm concerned about is you doing what I want you to do so I can get what I want. And that's really more of a human condition. The longer I'm sober, the more I realize how accurate those statements are. That I need power each day to live. I need power each day to overcome my selfishness and self-centeredness. There's a description of selfishness and self-centeredness in the big book where it talks about the actor trying to be a director. And the guy's hired to be an actor, but he takes on the role of the director. And in doing that, he tries to get everybody to do what he wants them to do. He wants things to go the way he wants them to go. He wants the outcome to be exactly how he plans. And when things don't go the way that he wants them to go, or people don't act the way he wants them to act, or the outcome isn't the outcome that he planned out, I'm going to get to the traditions. Leading up to it. He gets mad, gets angry, gets indignant, or he might get nice and kind, but he's always got this hidden motive to get something. And all that's talking about is our desire to control everything. And again, the longer I'm sober, the more I realize how accurate that scenario is that my problem is I want to control everything. And I want things to go the way I want them to go. I want people to act the way I want them to act. And many times I'll be real nice and kind to you, but I got a hidden motive to get something. And then when things don't go that way, then I might be a little nicer to you, or I might get mad and really show you guys don't realize who I am. To show you who you're really dealing with, to try to control something. And all that's based out of self-centered fear of trying to get something I want, or fear that I'm going to lose something that I think I already have. And the best way that I have found to deal with that, whatever that is inside of me that wants to control everything and thinks that I can actually change an outcome of something, is obviously through prayer and through continued inventory, but it's the application of the 12 traditions. And the steps basically get me to a place where I can operate in the world and I can get along with people a little bit because I've made amends to them and nobody's after me anymore. And the 12th step talks about practicing principles in all your affairs. And so the question is, well, how do you do that? I mean, how do I actually practice principles? And I think for me, every day I'm constantly making decisions. I always look at it as like step 6 and 7. Here's the defect. Am I going to act out on it, or am I going to apply a principle? Am I going to act out on the shortcoming, or am I going to actually bring God into it? And prior to getting sober, there was no existence of God in any of my decisions. There was no existence of thinking about others in any of my decisions. And at some point for me, and I was probably 5 years sober before I kind of came to this conclusion that I needed to go all in on the program. And the question I had to ask myself was, do I really want to practice principles and everything? Do I really want to be a good guy? Do I really want to practice love and tolerance? Do I really want to be a peacemaker? Do I really want to serve God and my fellow man? Or are those things that I just give lip service to? And I consciously kind of made a decision that I was going to try to do those things. And the first 2 traditions for me are all about, all the traditions, if you read, and I had a AA Comes of Age book that I was going to bring, and there's a good little 2-paragraph thing that Bill Wilson wrote about the traditions and how they apply to the individual just as good as they do the group. We always think about the traditions applying to the group, but he writes in there that they're just as important to the individual as they are the group, and that we can apply them to our own defects and shortcomings, just like the group can. Actually, he uses the word sin. And so anyway, I forgot the book. I had some notes written in the book too, so I'm operating with no notes or nothing, but that's fine. Steve let me borrow his book. But the traditions, they ask us to lay aside personal ambition. They ask us to lay aside selfishness. They ask us to lay aside self-centeredness so that we can be in a position to get along with people, so that we can be in a position to help people. And the first two traditions to me are all about unity and trust. And the first tradition talks about the common welfare is more important than an individual. This is the ultimate in getting rid of self-centeredness, because now it's telling me I'm not the most important person in the room. Come on. I mean, that's the opposite of the actor being the actor and the director thing. I don't know about anybody else, but prior to coming here, I never felt equal to anybody. I was either less than you or better than you, depending on the situation. And that's a bad place to operate from. The first tradition tells me that I'm just one among many. And it tells me that the group is more important than me. That the common welfare of the group is ultimately what's best for me. So if I follow that logic, then basically, if I do what's best for the group, that ultimately is what's best for me. And the way I think about that is I'm a member of a lot of different groups. Right? I'm a family as a group, work's a group, AA is a group. If I'm involved in a church or any other kind of community thing, then those are all groups. And it's important for me to, when I'm involved with a group like that, is to literally think about what's best for everybody. And the second tradition, to me, is all about listening, that I got to listen to people. If I'm going to truly see what the group conscious is, then I got to keep that open mind, and I got to listen. I got to, that prayer in the 12 and 12, the St. Francis prayer where he says, seek first to understand and to be understood. That's part of what, to me, is part of the first two traditions, is that if I'm listening to you and I try to listen to God and listen to the truth come out of you, then that's what helps me. Now, I'm not a guy that listens real good, because I think I know a lot. And when you start talking to me, I'm sure y'all have probably never done this, but when people, if you start talking to me, I'm immediately filtering it through my experience. I'm immediately thinking about all these great words I'm going to say to you. And if you're talking to me and I'm trying to figure out what my response is, I'm really not listening to you. Right? And the first two traditions have kind of taught me that I need to try to listen to you. I need to try to pay attention to what people are saying. Try to understand what you're saying before I respond. Maybe not even respond all the time. And I'll tell you just a recent example. So again, if I do what's best for the group, that ends up being what's best for me. A recent example of this is my mom has gotten very ill and needs like 24-hour care in the house. Well, she was in the hospital for a week, and me and one of my sisters had been taking care of her. I've been taking care of her for the last 30 years, off and on. Well, now that she's sick, I got all these brothers and sisters that have been gone for 30 years that want to all of a sudden get involved. Got one guy that's come to the house and he stayed. First time he's been there in years, and now he's an expert on Mom. He's got a few ideas about what should happen, and they got this other guy that just flew in. He's been gone for 35 years, and now all of a sudden he's asking all these questions. And anyway, I might need to do a little inventory on that. Now, don't let them listen to this tape, because I've not said any of this to them. This is part of the tradition at work. I'm thinking in my mind, well, you son of a guns have been absent for years. me and one of my sisters have been dealing with this for 30 years. This ain't nothing new. I mean, you're all of a sudden you're experts and you got all these ideas. I'm thinking in my mind, where you been? You can't just come in and now just take over. So here's what I did. Because everybody's got different ideas on what needs to happen and who's going to stay there and where's she going to go next and all this. And so I scheduled a call with all 4 of them for later this week. And I said, all 5 of us are going to discuss the situation. We're going to come up with a game plan. And they thought that was just the greatest idea in the world. But that's the first and second tradition at work. Whereas what I really want to do is say, screw you guys, right? We got this. You guys go back to the other states and leave us alone. But the tradition tells me that I should do what's best for the group. And I should actually be grateful that they're finally stepping in and I can take a break. Instead of, thinking that I'm all that. So that's just a kind of and the other thing that hit me on that was that the second tradition talks about a loving God. Right? It talks about a loving God that's expressed through the group conscience. So am I acting that way? Right? Am I actually trying to be loving and tolerant and work and kind of operating in a manner like that? And to do that, it really takes a lot of laying aside your personal ambitions and your thoughts and your ideas on certain things and really doing what's best for other people. And my experience is ultimately when I do what's best for you, it's what's best for me. The third tradition talks about group membership and basically says that anybody can be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous if they have a drinking problem. And to me, what that means is that Alcoholics Anonymous has no prejudice. That the program of AA will accept anybody. Now, there's people and there's groups in AA that don't do that. But the program itself and the tradition as it's written will accept anybody. And the way that I practice this personally is I try to help anybody. I don't care who you are, what your background is, what your color is, what your origin is, lifestyle. Nobody asked me any of that stuff when I got here. They just tried to help me. And I try to pass that on to other people. In my personal life, I try to keep an open mind towards people with different ideas and different lifestyles. And I try to embrace that and not try to change anybody. And I do that because the 12 steps taught me that my job is to be of maximum service to God and people about me, and to not pick and choose who I help. Even in my family, there's a lot of different types of prejudices. I used to participate in a lot of that stuff a long time ago. The tradition has taught me to now I don't participate in it. If people want to have conversations or talk about stuff or try to exclude people from things or family gatherings, I don't participate in that. Everybody's welcome. Number 4 talks about that groups are autonomous. Basically, an AA group can basically do what it wants to do. Nobody's going to come down and get you. I don't think. They might nowadays, but in the fourth tradition, if you look at the history of it, is that they originally were afraid that groups were going to do stuff that was going to hurt the AA name and whatnot, and they realized that all that was just fears. And it basically says that a group can do whatever it wants to do, but if it's going to make a decision that's going to impact another group or AA as a whole, they ought to talk to them first. So to me, this is one that has a lot of utility personally, because it tells me that, hey, I got freedom to do what I want to do, but if I'm going to make a decision that's going to impact somebody, I probably should talk to them first. Prior to getting sober, I never did that. I just did stuff, and if it impacted you, that was fine. If it didn't, that was fine. But if it had a negative impact on you, I didn't care. I mean, all I was worried about, again, I was selfish and self-centered. All I'm worried about is myself. Fourth tradition tells me that I got to stop that kind of behavior, and that I should confer with people if I'm going to make a decision that is going to impact them. Good example of that today. I'm actually supposed to be at home right now resting. All right? Jay called me this morning and says, "We going to Southern Pines?" I was like, "Yeah." And then I realized, I was like, I haven't told Sarah yet though, so let's see what happens with that. So after we got off the phone, I went and told her, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to Southern." No, that's not what I said. I was trying to run the show, just for full disclosure. I was being real kind and nice. "Hey, I forgot I'm supposed to go to Southern Pines and give a talk." And they're like, "What do you think about that?" And she was not real happy about it, but she said, "Well, are you driving?" I was like, "No, I'm not going to drive. I'm going to get somebody to come pick me up." She says, "Well, you can go as long as you're not driving." So that's an example of where I didn't do the best job on that one. I'll give you that. But that decision to come down here could impact my wife, so I probably should talk to her about it first. Now I can tell you that she didn't do that one time. It's a little funny story. I got a job up in Ohio one time, and I flew up there. Worthless story, but I flew up to Ohio, and it snows a lot up there where we were going, and I was up there for a little while, and then I came back, and she picked me up at the airport. She drives up on this big, brand new SUV. I don't know anything about it. And I get, and I'm like, I was like, "Nice ride." She says, "Yeah, I went and bought it the other day. Figured there's going to be a lot of snow up in Ohio. I'm going to need the four-wheel drive." And I said, "Okay." Never discussed it after that. But, no, a good way she could have practiced this tradition would have been to have called me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about going and buying an expensive SUV. What do you think about it?" Right? But this is all about trying to, if you're going to do something that's going to impact somebody, talk to them about it. All right? Don't just go do stuff that's going to hurt somebody or that's going to impact them without discussing it with them. It also tells me that I should let people have their own experience. That's what AA does to groups, right? Groups can have their own experience. And that the fourth tradition teaches me that I should let people have their own experience, that I shouldn't try to constantly interfere with things and share my experience with you in hopes that you can have my experience or the same experience that I have, that I should give people the autonomy to have their own experience and make their own mistakes. That's okay. And not constantly give input. The traditions that give Alcoholics Anonymous in general has given me purpose. The fifth tradition talks about purpose. Right? It talks about the primary purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous to help a suffering alcoholic. What AA has done for me, it's given me a personal mission. It's given me a personal kind of a personal primary purpose to basically be a child of God and try to help other people. Now, some of us specifically, you spend a lot of time helping alcoholics, and that's great. That's what I do, but I believe that God has gotten people in Alcoholics Anonymous sober to help society, to help the community, to help families, and that anything that diverts me from that purpose, I probably should not do. Now, that doesn't mean I don't do stuff and don't participate in other things in life, but anything that's going to divert me from carrying out my purpose, I probably shouldn't do. AA keeps things simple. Right? We've got one purpose, that's to help alcoholics. If you keep things that simple, it's hard to screw it up. Now, I'm a guy prior to getting sober, well, even a few years into sobriety, I bounce around everything. I change with the wind. Right? I'm going to be an attorney this day. I'm going to be an electrician this day. Then tomorrow I'm going to be a AA counselor. Then I'm going to be a house painter. Might go get me a tour bus and be a rock star. And basically what happens when I'm involved in 50 different things, I'm ineffective at any of them. I'm not being effective at any of them. And so what the fifth tradition has taught me is to try to focus on one thing. If I'm at work, I try to focus on being a real estate agent. Right? If I'm with you doing something, I try to focus on being present with you. If I'm at home with my wife, I try to have some specific time without the phone and without the computer and without books and other stuff, and just spend time with my wife. Right? If I go visit my mom, I try to be present there. Focus on the purpose of that visit. That's the fifth tradition of me, is that I try to be present where I'm at and do what's in front of me. Personally, I think number 6 is probably one of the most important personally for me. It talks about letting property, money, prestige, authority diverting us from our primary spiritual aim, I think is what the long form says. Right? That there's a lot of distractions in the world. There's a lot of temptation out there. There's a lot. It's just everywhere in different forms and different ways. And the sixth tradition tells a group to not get involved in property and prestige and raising money because it gets in the way of helping alcoholics. The sixth tradition, personally for me, because you hear this sometimes in Alcoholics Anonymous, that AA gives you a life that'll take you away from AA, and it's absolutely true. So what the sixth tradition personally tells me is that I shouldn't let my job, my relationships, money, material things, whatever those things are, divert me from growing spiritually. And I can tell you, this is another one of those things where it's hard to be honest. Personally, I've never done that. I have worked with hundreds of people that have. They let the job become more important than praying and helping somebody. They let the relationship become more important than going to their home group and going to the detox. They let that desire for money or material things become more important than going to the jail and doing their prayer and meditation, whatever it is. And I'm a guy that's had a lot of. I've had a full life. I've had a lot of success. I've been involved in a lot of stuff, and that's never been primary. It's always been secondary. In that I've always tried to keep a regular, consistent schedule of prayer and meditation, of being consistent with a sponsor, going to my home group, and trying to help somebody else. And that I need to work more spiritually than I do materially. And that when I focus on spiritual stuff, just like the book says, that other stuff comes. But if I put the other stuff first, then what would happen to me is I would get diverted. And that stuff would become more important. Then that sickness would come back into my mind. I'm probably going to drink. So what the sixth tradition has told me is that, man, it's great to have money. It's great to have a job. It's great to have material things. It's great to be involved in an awesome relationship. But my relationship with God's more important. That my relationship with my Creator, and that my carrying out that purpose of helping another alcoholic, it has to be primary. Does not mean that the other stuff's not as important. I just can't let it stop me from growing spiritually. Prior to getting sober, I was a guy that was entitled. I let especially my parents and my in-laws, buy stuff for me and take care of me financially. And there was not much about me that was self-supporting. I can guarantee you that. And that's what the seventh tradition talks about. It talks about the groups being self-supporting. I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous how to be self-supporting. I learned not to be entitled. I learned that people don't owe me anything. I learned that financial stability was my responsibility, not anybody else's. Now, if you want to give me some money after the meeting, I might take it, but it's a joke. But I learned how to basically not spend beyond my means, not do things that I can't afford. Now, I've done things I can't afford sober, but slowly over time, I've learned to not do things that I can't afford, to not be, irresponsible with money. And I had been irresponsible with money, sober. I was sober, I don't know, when I got married the second time, 4 or 5 years, I was 6 years sober. But I brought a bunch of debt and just irresponsibility into that marriage. And I was tens of thousands of dollars in debt. And I just got tired of it. And I wrote out a plan, what I was going to do. I prayed. My wife prayed. And we stuck to that. Through spiritual principles, what looked like years of having to deal with that and paying down debt was accomplished quickly because of the seventh tradition and because people in Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to do that. And then I in turn learned how to give back. Now, I'm a guy that don't want to give nothing, right? I mean, I didn't, before getting sober, I didn't give anything. I just took. The seventh tradition taught me to basically give without anything in return, to be willing to do that. And my experience has been the more I give, the more I get. I don't know how to explain that, but it's absolutely true. Number 8 talks about AA is non-professional, that we don't do things for hire, right? We don't 12-step people for fees. We do that for free and for fun. Personally, what that kind of how I would apply that out in my personal life, Alcoholics Anonymous is full of talented people, right? I mean, in this room right here, we got somebody that can do anything. It doesn't matter what the task is. There's somebody in here that can do it, and many of us, all of us, have different types of talents. And what the 8th tradition has taught me is that I should give back to my community. That I should actually try to, whatever my talents are, I should probably give that back to the community without thought of anything in return. And I've helped the homeless. I've been on different. I made an amends one time. I owed an amends to some schools, and part of my amends back to the school system was I got involved with this organization called Junior Achievement, where they taught business principles and capitalism to elementary. I did elementary school, but I went and taught some classes to a 3rd grade class and to a 6th grade class, and I did that for free and for fun because I had the ability to do it. And to me, that was part of taking the 8th tradition of using kind of my profession in the community without charging anything, just doing that for free. I also learned it's good to hire a professional if you got a job to do. Like if you want an auto mechanic, you got a problem with your car, hire a mechanic. Don't try to do it on your own. I burned up a hot tub one time thinking I was an electrician. I could have easily hired somebody to do that. We're running out of time here. Number 9 talks about, well, just real quick on number 9. In the long form, it talks about leadership in Alcoholics Anonymous. It talks about universal respect, and that the key to kind of being a good leader is universal respect. And what what that means, I mean, if you think about people that you look up to, think about people that you like or that you would follow, they always set a good example by the way that they live. And not so much that they do everything right, but they try to do the best that they can, and they're honest about it, and they're just human. And the ninth tradition is all about kind of leadership and trying to set a good example, and trying to. I like the term peacemaker. You know, and there's another phrase: the meek will inherit the earth. They're just trying to be a good citizen and a good person, and trying to get along with others. Is really what the ninth tradition is about to me. Now number 10, you could do a whole weekend workshop on tradition 10. Especially nowadays, right? So, where it talks about Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't have an opinion on outside issues. The long form talks about that we should, at all costs, avoid controversy having to deal with politics, religion, or alcohol reform. They wanted to keep all that out of Alcoholics Anonymous so that we could get along regardless of our differences and help each other. Alcoholics Anonymous in general has done a really good job of that. There are groups and members that haven't. We won't talk about any of that. So the 10th tradition on a personal level for me means that I like the term non-resistance. Right? So AA doesn't oppose anybody. AA has no opinion on anything. Now, to say that an individual doesn't have any opinions obviously would be dumb. To say that an individual doesn't oppose anybody would obviously be dumb, because that's not true. But what this has helped me is that I should choose my battles wisely, that I should speak only on truth, and realize that the truth doesn't need to be defended, and that most stuff doesn't need a response. And because what's important to me is trying to be helpful to people. And if I'm worried about, your social life or your political life, even in some cases, if I even know that, it can create division. I'll tell you just a little story. There were a bunch of us that went out to eat one night before our home group, and it was right before an election, a political election. And this guy made this comment about one of the candidates. And me and another guy, now I regret doing this. I had never done anything like this up to this point. Me and another guy kind of jumped in and started making comments about this candidate. I was actually joking about it. I mean, I was just messing with the guy. Well, he took offense to it. He quit the group. That night, quit our group, never came back. And I mean, I've since made an amends. I regret doing it, but it just really, I mean, even after we had a conversation with the guy about, we were just joking with you, we thought you were playing along, but it's a reminder of how sensitive some of that stuff is. And how just the most, what you think might be the most innocent thing can really have an impact on somebody. So the 10th tradition, it's just taught me to not pick fights with people over stuff that just doesn't matter. That we're all human, and that what I want to do is I want to try to be helpful to people. And I'm a guy that because of this tradition, I can be your friend and be helpful to you regardless of what our differences are. And then if we let those differences stop us from helping one another, then at some point nobody's going to get help. And if only like-minded people migrate to each other and help each other, then that really doesn't help anything either. And so what I've learned through the 10th tradition is to try not to respond to certain things and to ask myself the question, is my response going to be helpful or hurtful? If it's going to be helpful, then maybe I should do it. If it's going to be hurtful and I'm doing it just to get a rise out of somebody or to take a jab at somebody, I probably should keep it to myself. And 11 and 12 really kind of tie into that. But actually, I just kind of realized that now that 11 it talks about anonymity. 12 talks about anonymity and the idea of practicing humility, the idea of not praising ourselves, and it's kind of contrary to some of the stuff you hear in society nowadays. That people are supposed to promote themselves, and you're supposed to do all these things, and the social media, kind of feeds into that, into a lot of that drama. The 11th tradition tells me that there's no need for me to praise myself, that my works speak for me, my actions speak for me. I was on a career for 24 or 26 years before they canned me, and never asked for a promotion or a raise, and never did without. And I went from basically sweeping floors and stealing money from them to being the president, just by showing up every day and doing my job, and not feeling entitled and asking for stuff and asking for that raise and saying you guys don't understand how hard I'm working. I never did any of that stuff. The example is what spoke for me. It's the same thing in my family or in the community. I don't have to constantly tell people all the great things I'm doing, right? That your work speak for you. It also would tell me that today with social media, I'm a social media guy. I love TikTok. I love Snapchat. I got quite a few followers on Instagram and Twitter. It's true. Go look. Been on Facebook forever. I'm an original TikTok guy. I was on TikTok before probably anybody in the room. But I've never used it for, to spout about my Alcoholics Anonymous membership or to talk about my chips and my anniversaries. That's just unnecessary. And it's somewhat in conflict with the tradition, in that's a public space, and so I'm publicly disclosing my membership if I do that. Plus, there's just no need to. Nor do I try to use it for personal gain. I've never tried to use my membership for personal gain. And I which is kind of I understand why the tradition's there, because I had years ago I was interviewed. They did this publication in Raleigh did this story on me. I won't bore you with details. I don't even like sharing it, but it does tie into the tradition about basically going from sweeping the floors to being an executive at this company. And when they interview you, they ask you questions like, well, what do you attribute your success to? It's like one of the questions. And now for me, I'm a street bum who never should have been anywhere or gone anywhere, and my whole success is always tied to Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I don't see it coming from anywhere else. It came from the program and the steps and the God that I found here. And when they ask you that question, it's hard to not say, well, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, that's what I wanted to say. And I wanted to tell them how great the program was. I did not do that because of good sponsorship and the tradition. That's what the tradition tells me to do. It tells me to refrain from that. But I can see how somebody that doesn't understand traditions would do that. And so, I mean, I didn't. And I've learned over the years that the idea of anonymity is basically what the tradition says. It's about humility. That I've been given a good life as a result of being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that I've been given a relationship with God. And I've been given the ability to help other people. And I've been given purpose. And I'm no longer in that self-constructed, isolated prison. And I'm free. I've been given freedom. I've been given a new mind. And that is a gift that's just meant to be passed on to other people. One at a time, face to face. And that it's not anything that I need to preach or speak from any mountaintop or do anything that's overly dramatic. That all those that gift is a gift from God, and that it's meant to be passed on. But it's meant for me to remember that I didn't do anything really to make it happen. That on that morning in July 2nd that I asked for help, that power came to me. That wasn't me. And for me to think that I had anything to do with that, and that I'm going to talk about it and talk about all the great things I've done, that would be a misuse of the gift. That I got to stay right size and realize that just because of God's grace and of other people that were willing to pass the gift on to me is the only reason I'm here. And that's my job, is to try to pass that on to others. So I appreciate y'all listening to me. Thank you.